Now, this isn't a political channel. I don't often display my personal views on politics or make videos on people based on their own. I point out scam artists, assholes, and crazy conspiracy nutcases, the latter being the focus of today's video. Just a fair warning, there's a chance this video gets a little bit heated. Tim Pool, a reporter with a large influence on the media, over 1 million subscribers on both of his channels, who posts several news stories every day. I used to watch Tim many years ago because he often covered interesting smaller stories that you might not hear from larger news sources, and gave many inside looks into particular areas of interest. However, a recent video from Tim Pool caught my eye. Defiant bar owner runs over cop enforcing illegal lockdown in New York City. Coming into this video with the opinion of, wow, that guy's insane. Curious to hear more about the story from Tim, I was instead met with,
But I tell you, the Great Reset's truly something crazy and scary. And guess what? Regular people won't be standing for it.
regular people, not a strong start. This video covers the story of Danny Presti, a bar owner in New York City who, against the city's attempt at containing a worldwide epidemic, thought bars were essential. Obviously, the police thought that was a no-no, so after confronting Danny, he jumped into his car, ran the deputy over, with him hanging off of the hood, and then driving about 100 yards before being arrested. Now, hearing this, you might think, it's pretty cut and dry. But not for Tim, no. He goes as far as to remove the title police, cops, and sheriff from the story, and instead replace it with oath breakers.
Defiant NYC bar owner struck deputy with his car. Wow. I almost want to go in and alter. You can inspect the element of the page and change text around. I'd like to change deputy to oath breaker. That's like my new thing, you know, like the cops who violate their oath to uphold the Constitution, oath breakers.
Which is starting to sound a little bit nutty. Kinda like those sovereign citizens with their road pirates.
Before you open my vehicle, before you open my vessel, I just want to let you know that you're committing a crime right now.
I need you to step out of the vehicle right now.
I have not done anything wrong.
Step up.
But it gets better a little later on. The video continues with Tim only ever mentioning we should probably not run over people over 10 minutes into the video.
Public house. After deputies observed patrons entering the establishment Saturday night in violation of the city and state closure orders. Sheriff Joseph Fucito said, Oathbreaker Joseph Fucito said, Oathbreakers attempted to kidnap Presti as he left the bar early Sunday. Presti got into his car, struck an Oathbreaker, and kept driving for about 100 yards, even as the Oathbreaker was left hanging onto his hood, Fucito said. Listen, I don't think he intentionally did it, but that's bad. Come on, man. We don't want to hit people with cars. We don't want violence. We don't want this to break down. But you know what? There's nothing to be said. There's no answer.
After several minutes of an attempted Viva la Revolution speech, where he makes sure to denote the viewers.
California, they issued a stay-at-home order. You can't leave your house. They are strangling out the poor, transferring the wealth to the elites. The state is sending out oath breakers. These are men and women who claim to enforce the law, but they're not enforcing any laws. That's why I can't call them cops. They're not enforcing laws. These edicts that came from the mouth of Cuomo, many of them found to be completely unconstitutional. So what are these cops doing? They're corrupt and taking cash in exchange to break the law. Sounds like they're now the criminals. We have a law. They're in violation of it, and they're getting paid by the government to do it. This is a corrupt system.
As peasants, inferring insults where there weren't any, to get the viewer riled up, while also referring to the authorities as dictators and tyrannical or corrupt governments, all to excuse the acts of defiance. isn't that what Black Lives Matter did, Tim? Didn't those protests justify their acts on innocent people by labeling them as Nazis? Because it's easier to convince yourself to beat a Nazi up than someone who just disagrees with you. That's kind of how this is coming off, Tim. Isn't that a bit of a dangerous sentiment, Tim? Doesn't feeding these people false views to increase aggression and dehumanize their opposition sound a little dangerous to you, Tim? Well, let's take a look through some of the comments and see the general consensus. Now, these aren't cherry-picked comments. I will scroll and let you see all of them, and only stop on a few, but please, read the ones above, read the ones below, to make sure you know I'm not just finding the crazies in the crowd. When the police carry out illegal and unconstitutional orders, they've joined the enemy. Imagine what would happen when you were told you had to stay home because of communism. I see they've chosen death. Bar owner runs over oathbreaker. Me. This is the way. Defend his actions. Time to boot up. Patriots stand together and fight. He was just fighting tyranny as his right in the Constitution. Free him. Good. Off with their heads if they're gonna enforce tyranny. Someone start a GoFundMe for this dude. Don't know much about it, but he's gonna need help. In 1939, the Jewish stores in Berlin were being observed and coasted down by police. How history comes around, huh? He didn't run over a cop, he ran over an oathbreaker. Cops matter, oathbreakers do not. Defiant patriot teaches a lesson to dictators' diversity hire. The guillotine starts to look more and more like a solution than a barbaric object from the past. This is the audience that he has, and he's getting them angry. Talks of revolution flood the comment. People condoning violence against the cops, against the government, against any opposition is all I see in here. People mention heads will roll like in France during the revolution. People will be hung for their crimes. They see government as communists or enemies of the state. Now, when you hear that, mixed in with the desperation, don't you think it's a little dangerous to be feeding these people stories and sympathizing with criminals? Listen to how giddy he gets every time he mentions the cop being run over.
For it. Now, this story is as spicy as they come. Okay, so this dude, I don't think he intentionally ran down a deputy, but he ran over a deputy. Look at it, running over a deputy. Woo! Apparently the cop was the oathbreaker, was hanging from the hood of the vehicle.
You fight against media, pushing political narratives, but immediately call for revolution and fighting against corrupt governments the moment you disagree with what happens. What kind of media are you, Tim? You're a hypocrite, and a dangerous one. I know what his response would be if he were to see this. I didn't call for violence. I didn't encourage revolution. And this is true, Tim, but you can't sit there and act like you don't dance around the idea, inviting the thoughts into people's heads, inadvertently proposing these outcomes. This isn't thought policing. Listen to yourself. Later on in the video, he mentions how the wealthy, elite, mainstream Hollywood executives are all allowed to break the rules, but not you peasants.
High-value business travelers to be exempt from quarantine in England. That's right!
When it mentions sports teams, yes, directors and their helpers, to allow to the returning of England without quarantine, and only if their job requires them to be in there in person. Why don't you cover the news, Tim? You visiting England to see the pretty little sights isn't essential, and they only do it because they provide substantial monetary relief to the country, preventing the economy from crashing. You know, That thing that you pretend like you're trying to stop? What monetary value could you or your viewers bring by visiting England? Do tell me. 'Cause I know what makes a lot of money. Movies. And sports? You know, like the two highest media incomes? But please tell me how you not being able to go to the bar is unfair. There is a worldwide epidemic going on, but it's only 3% mortality rate, you say. 3% of the United States is like 10 million people, Tim. But they're all old. They should die anyway. But you can't wear a mask for 5 minutes shopping at the grocery store? It's killing you, you say. Sounds like you should be called out. I live in a retirement town filled with old people with countless medical conditions, and they survive just fine with masks. You're not freedom fighters, you're people making your own problem worse. If your house was on fire, you'd let the firemen put it out, right? But wait, that's your private property, so how are you gonna let the government just enter your house? Oh, to prevent damage? To prevent the fire from spreading and burning down other houses? Sounds familiar, huh? Well, instead, you've decided to fight with the firemen, and now this small, containable fire has burnt down your entire house because you were too stubborn to have it put out. Damage will be done. Shit's gonna happen. But dragging this entire situation out is doing substantially more damage than just shutting up for a few weeks. It's called a state of emergency, not tyranny. There's a worldwide epidemic going on. Events like this calls for temporary rule changes, not your Nazi camps that you're putting it out to be. There's a tinfoil hat under your toque, Tim.